want to complexity, I want to reassure you that you will not be inundated with all sorts of complex mathematical formulae and nonlinear reactions and so on and so forth, all right? So what I want to really do is give you 2 stories from my life, and I hope that you're able to understand what I'm talking about. So let me see if I can. So the story starts in 2 different times of my life. When I first got out of training, which is what I call BC, not before Christ, but actually before complexity. And the other AC is after complexity. There's a huge gap in between the 2. So let me start with the first part of my life. 1988, I arrived at Swedish Covenant Hospital in Rockford, Illinois. My very first job as an infectious disease clinician and a hospital epidemiologist. And I meet Dr. Roger Clint. Dr. Roger Clint was one of the first physicians to actually take on a leadership role in running a hospital. He is one of the luminaries of the American College of Physician Executives, a very, very sharp man. And he tells me, we are having a lot of infections post-coronary artery bypass graft surgery. And he said, fix it. He didn't ask me to figure out what's going on. He didn't ask me to analyze the situation. He said, make sure it doesn't happen again. All right? So I go about in the usual style. Remember that cartoon of problem-solving flowchart, you know, and the gist of it is, if you can blame somebody, do that. If you cannot blame anybody, run away. Now, obviously, that kind of methodology didn't work with Roger Clint. So I had to go to the other method of solving a problem, which is in the other cartoon that shows that in any kind of problem solving, and particularly an outbreak, you have to go through a series of evaluations trying to figure out, firstly, is there an outbreak? So my first charge was, are coronary artery bypass graft surgery infections really different from others? And I found, yes, maybe, maybe not. Not really a great difference. But since this was a sternal wound infection, obviously the stakes were much, much higher. So that's one of the first things that I learned. And part of my training was really a systems-based approach where you had to go through the entire phenomena linked together and not try to pinpoint the blame at somebody. Certainly the surgeons were very competent, and I knew from their reputation from other surgeons, patients, etc., that were highly skilled people. So next slide. So what do? You look at the entire system, the parts, everything, every component of it. And I went through the entire thing. Is it the surgeon? Is it the central sterilization department? Are there patient factors? Is it the operation theater, the nursing staff, the anesthesiologist not giving the antibiotic in the correct time? What else am I missing? So I went through all of this methodically. Believe me, it took a great deal of time and energy, and the answer always was no, 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 no. All right? So then I said, well, time for Gembutsu, which is go see the real thing in the Gemba, in the real place, and Genjutsu, the real situation. And once again, failure. So I had to go back to the drawing board and say, think, 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 think. So what I did is go back to the drawing board and say, I have to use a tracer methodology. I have to actually follow the patient right from the beginning to the end and see what's going on. And what I noticed in the operating theater is that the surgical site was extraordinarily clean. So clean that there was no hair. So I said, what on earth? And then I discovered that the barber was shaving the skin, the operative site, the night before. And 1,000 light bulbs went off in my brain and said, bingo, I have the answer. You see what happens is when you shave the site, you're actually starting the surgery. And you are starting the surgery without the benefit of site preparation or preoperative antibiotics. The abrasions of the skin caused by the razor start the infection already. So what did I have to do? Well, I had to fire the barber. You can't do that. And a poor fellow's got a living to make. So I said, okay, you don't fire the barber. But let's get rid of all the shaving blades and make sure that nobody's shaved. Easier said than done. So by the time I had figured out what to do and get electric clippers and get the administration to buy the clippers, distribute all the clippers, tell everybody to do this, blah, 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 months pass. And I find that people are still shaving. I find that the nurses and the doctors are hiding razors here and there in the drawers. Okay? So finally, it took months for me to eliminate the practice of shaving the operative site. Now what is amazing is 40-odd years later, I still find this practice prevalent in many places, and deja vu, I have to still meet the same kinds of resistance when I try to make people change their behavior. Humans. We'll come to that later. So over the next few years, I keep thinking about this experience of mine. This is really my baptism by fire, you know, nothing that I had learned in the didactic lectures of epidemic investigation, outbreak management, blah, 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 ever prepared me for what I had to encounter. I have encountered several other epidemics, some of which I have published. You're welcome to read them. But here's the deal. I started thinking about my entire experience a lot. And amazingly, 20 years later, you know, actually 10 years later, I read this fantastic book by James Gleick called Chaos. And again, several bulbs go off in my brain. Wow, there is a mathematical science that can actually describe all of these phenomena in nature that I thought was completely random. No, they're not random. And then I learned there are systems that are deterministic, which means that if you are able to figure out all the calculations, you should be able to figure out the outcome. And then there are systems that are not necessarily deterministic. So let's explore that a little bit further. In this, you will see several cartoons. And first of all, let me acknowledge the incredible role that the Santa Fe Institute had in my understanding of the science of complexity. One thing I want to show you that I learned from Chaos is what is called a Lorentz equation. As you can see on the top right-hand side, a small change in the initial conditions will diverge over a period of 12 seconds into major differences. And as you can see, that graph keeps on diverging until there's a marked difference from the initial condition. This is called a Lorentz equation. A Lorentz equation is very frequently used in predicting climatic conditions and so on and so forth, and many very different complex equations. So I told you in the bottom right side, there is yet another cartoon that shows you a simple system where you can easily figure out what are the components of the system and you can predict what happens. On the other extreme is a system where there are differential equations, stochastic matrix models, where it's impossible to figure out what's going inside that box, and all you can figure out is there's an input and there's an output. And somewhere in between is the in-between. So Hahn and Bircher have this beautiful cartoon in their paper introducing complexity or complex adaptive systems to the health sciences. And basically what they say is that inside this boundary, there are many different agents that interact with each other. Many of these interactions are nonlinear equations. There is an input, there are agents, there's entropy, there's a boundary, and then there's an output, which is called work. But pay attention to what that little star is out there. That's an attractor. It is what we call a strange attractor. And this strange attractor is very often responsible for skewing the entire system one way or the other, and it is rarely under our control. So 20 years later, now I arrive in 2020. This is the second part of my life. This is AC, after complexity. And I pick on as a challenge introducing the entire system of hospital infection control and prevention in a government general hospital in the Mehboob district. And thanks to the amazing dedication of the intrepid Dr. Ramkishan Dharmakari, who was the superintendent, and his staff, the committee is formed, we implement Six Sigma tools, and the first project I take up is clean up the toilets. Very glamorous. Now, amazingly, week after week, this committee meets and looks at what's going on, thinks about what is going on. And the goal is very simple. And you'd be amazed at the complexity of the effort required to achieve that goal. That goal was have a clean toilet, have running water out there, and have soap out there. And have disposable paper towels to make sure that you don't use the same wet towel cloth that contaminates everybody's hands sequentially. And amazingly, they worked at it. They really, really worked at it. Imagine a bunch of surgeons in a hospital, instead of focusing on the operating theater, go down to the most humble place in the hospital, the toilets, and focus on cleaning up the toilets. And part of the reason they did that is they really worked as a team. And if you don't work as a team, you fail, because we are as strong as the weakest link in our chain. And this man, Dr. Ramkishan Dharmakari, I hope he's in the audience somewhere. If he is, please go meet him and applaud him. Because you know what? He did one of the rare things that people do. He gathered all of the housekeeping staff, lauded them, acknowledged their great work, served them lunch with his own hands. And they said, oh my God, nobody ever even looks at us. None of the doctors look at us, none of the administrators look at us. They don't even recognize that we exist. But if they did not exist, you would not have a clean, safe toilet to go to. Now, here's one of those humbling experiences. I walk into a 5-star hotel, and I walk into a quote-unquote toilet that is for the handicapped. And the moment I walk in, I slip and I fall down. So just imagine the emotions that are going through my brain. I am humiliated, I am embarrassed, I am wet, and I am dirty. So I lodge a protest with the hospital management immediately. The next morning, a whole slew of senior hospital administrators have come to mollify me. I asked them one simple question. Did you actually go and examine what the condition is of the toilet before you came to talk to me? And the silence is deafening. See how powerful I am? So why should we care about wet toilets, apart from the fact that yours truly can fall there, break my bones, and break my neck? I mean, that would not make a great difference to humanity as a whole, right? But here's why you should make a difference. Dirty, wet toilets are not uncommon in public places, including hospitals.
Vijay, time.
All right. Hospitals really are very proud of the great technology and so on and so forth, but they ignore a simple fact that toilets are the dirtiest place in the hospital, and the moment you flush the toilet, you create an aerosol that will kill everybody when they walk in and out of that toilet. So this is why you must make a point to think about that strange attractor. The strange attractor very often are high-powered administrators and doctors and so on and so forth. If you don't address that, your system's going to fail. So here's another wonderful example of human factors engineering. All right, there's a fly in the toilet. Why is there a fly in the toilet? Well, in Schiphol, in the airport, they found that there was a lot of urine surrounding the toilet bowls. So how do you persuade a man to aim into the toilet bowl and not outside? So they painted a little fly out there. Great example, because it improved practice by 80% and the results by 80%. So here's my challenge to all of you. Go out and clean up your toilets. Make it safe for everybody to use. Please start at your own home. And like good Jedi warriors, may the Force be with you. Thank you.
Thanks, Vijay. I think that was an apt talk in the beginning of this conference. Vijay tried to make it as complex as possible, but ended with a very simple message.